Doctor Who Series 11 is a mess. In all of the years I've been watching, this was it for me. Chris Chibnall has killed Doctor Who. Doctor Who has gone PC mad. Jodie Whittaker can't act. These are the sort of comments that I have read week in, week out, while the most recent series of Doctor Who has been on the air. It makes me laugh that even now, people are not over the fact that the Doctor is now being played by a woman. If there is one thing that a few of us have learnt, it is that the fan base has become more divisive than ever, because I have seen some really nasty stuff on Facebook and Twitter. And quite honestly, it's disgusting. I've got so sick of reading this over and over again. So before I start reviewing Doctor Who Series 11, I just want to make it absolutely clear that there is no room for this in the comments of my video. There's no room for it whatsoever. If you hated Doctor Who Series 11 for a valid reason, then fair enough. And if you loved it for a valid reason or reasons, then the same goes for that. At the end of the day, there is no right or wrong answer, but please, play nice in the comments. I have no more time for this. So, without further ado, here is my Doctor Who Series 11 review. Before I give my analysis of the 10 episodes of the series along with the New Year's Day special, let's go through some background info. Stephen Moffat is no longer the head writer of the series. Chris Chibnall, who has written some earlier episodes of Doctor Who in both the RTD and Moffat era, is now officially the head writer, showrunner and executive producer of the programme. Chibnall is the only writer to have any previous writing credits on the programme. Overall, of the new run of episodes, including the New Year's Day special, Chris Chibnall has written or co-wrote 7 of the 11 new stories. Now, that is huge. The last time I saw a single writer write that many stories in one series was Russell T Davies in the first series of New Who. Of those 13 episodes, RTD wrote 8, bearing in mind that 4 of his episodes were two-parters. So in essence, he wrote 6 out of 10 of those stories. If we flash forward to Series 11 and Resolution, Chris Chibnall has a sole writing credit for 6 stories too. None of these stories are two-parters because Chibnall opted for standalone stories which would be contained in their own episodes. Moreover, there will be no more story arcs, a format which has sort of grown tired in recent series under the direction of Stephen Moffat. Also, Chibnall received a co-writing credit alongside Mallory Blackman, so technically he wrote a whopping 7 of these episodes. Now, that's just crazy. Looking at the statistic is quite interesting because this shows that Chibnall would surely have made his stamp on this series. So, did he? Well, yes he did. Was it a good stamp? It was mixed, really. Back in 2016, when the news broke that Chibnall would be taking the reins as showrunner from Stephen Moffat, following on from the 2017 series, which ultimately was also Peter Capaldi's final series as 12th Doctor, I, in all honesty, was far from impressed. Unlike Moffat, I don't think that Chibnall really made any lasting impression as far as his previous scripts for the show have gone. Alright, we've got 42. Overall, a pretty decent story, which came in the middle of what was what I'd like to call the second golden age of Doctor Who in the Russell T Davies era, with the first golden age, of course, being the Philip Hinchcliffe era back in the 70s. After this, Chibnall wrote a few stories in the Moffat era. We had The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, which, to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of, namely because I have a soft spot for the 1970s Silurians, and this story is more of a rehash of the original appearance, but done worse, with some characters which I just really didn't care about. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, as daft as it sounds, is not so bad. We have some good supporting characters, a good villain, and overall it's fun, except for the robots and Nefertiti. Better than the Silurian two-parter from Series 5, But then there was the power of three. Oh, this had so much potential, so much setup. I think if this was a two-parter, then I think it probably might have worked better. The problem with this story is that it suffered so much from the, oh, we have 5 minutes left, let's wrap everything up, with poor plot convenience. I hate it when that happens. Casting that aside, I'd say that the first half or so of the episode was pretty good, with the handling of the mysterious cubes. Finally, and while this was not an episode, but a short to tie in with the events of the Angels Take Manhattan, P.S. was also written by Chris Chibnall as an epilogue to the relationship between Rory and Brian. Even though it was a short, which some people may not even know about, this was very well written, and it was great to see it come to light in some way. That was the last contribution that Chibnall made to Doctor Who, some 6 years before he would write for the show again, but this time it will be him who will be in the driving seat. With the news that Peter Capaldi would star as the 12th Doctor for a final series with Series 10 in 2017, this signalled a new wind of change for Doctor Who. Fans already knew that Stephen Moffat would be also departing at the end of that year as showrunner as well. So now, Chibnall was tasked with the mission of casting the 13th Doctor. There were names such as Chris Marshall being suggested to be the successor to Peter Capaldi. While I do like Chris Marshall, I personally feel that it would have been a somewhat boring choice of actor to play the role. But I would be more than open to see Marshall play another role in the show if it was appropriate. Series 10 came and went, and it was still a secret to many as to who the 13th Doctor was going to be played by. There have been hints planted throughout Series 10 that suggested that the next one could probably be a woman. After all, it was established for a while that a Gallifreyan can change genders upon regeneration. In July 2017, after the conclusion of Series 10, the possibility of the next Doctor being the first female incarnation in the programme's history was finally made a reality when Yorkshire-born actress Jodie Whittaker had been cast in the role of the 13th Doctor. According to Chris Chibnall, it was always a part of his grand plan after becoming the showrunner that he would cast a woman in the part of the Doctor. Whittaker was believed to always be one of the front runners from the role, if not his top choice. That's understandable, given that Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall have both worked together on Broadchurch, which also starred a host of Doctor Who alumni, including David Tennant. Naturally, Jodie Whittaker's status as an actor had become more recognised. After all, hasn't anyone who's played a Doctor so far? As Tennant had informed her in a phone call, this would change her life forever. For me, this was the biggest change that the show has ever had. Yes, some will criticise it for being too long in the waiting, and that it doesn't make any sense that only now the Doctor is a woman after so many incarnations as a male. That I totally understand. But make no mistake, love or hate it, this was a moment in history for media in general because it potentially changes the whole mechanics of how the show works. By now, so many have become familiar with a male actor in the role. This was the first decision which Chibnall had made as showrunner, and it is by far the boldest. What a way to make a stamp on the show. If you follow Doctor Who on Facebook, you can also see how people feel about this, and it's mainly negative. So now, Series 11 has come and gone. Are people's reactions to all of these changes justified? Well, as I mentioned earlier, this series had 10 episodes and a New Year special to introduce us to a new Doctor, new companions, new menaces, self-contained stories, a new TARDIS, and new writers. So with that, you had some new ideas. It is no exaggeration that this was indeed the beginning of a new era, an era which will be continuing in the coming years. We all had to wait almost a year to finally see Jodie in full swing as the 13th Doctor. We saw her at the end of the disappointing conclusion to Peter Capaldi in Twice Upon a Time, but that was only for a few seconds. If you judged her on that, then I hardly call it fair. If I was to scrutinise the scene, then it would be the direction. The regeneration was all samey, there was nothing new about it. Capaldi explodes, glowing energy comes out, and then, bam, in comes Whittaker. Next thing you know, the TARDIS malfunctions and it leaves us on a cliffhanger. On this occasion, the 13th Doctor is falling from the TARDIS moments after her beginning. I bet so many wanted that to be the moment that she died. I wonder why that is.
Ah! You have a woman's hand, my lord.
Flash forward to October 2018, and finally, we were graced with the full debut of the 13th Doctor and her new companions. Graham, played by the host of The Chase, Bradley Walsh. Yaz, played by fellow U-Clan alumni, Mandip Gill. And Ryan, played by former Hollyoaks actor, Tosin. On first impressions, there really wasn't much that I had to say about this TARDIS team. It always seems a bit crowded when the Doctor has three companions, whether it's William Hartnell or Peter Davison. Hell, even sometimes with just two companions, the writers have to think about the predicaments that the main characters can get themselves into week in and week out. Now that we've had a series, I confirm that I do have problems with this, which you can probably guess if you have watched the series and seen other reviewers talk about the characters. For me, the biggest draw of Doctor Who Series 11 was a characterisation of all the main characters, and on occasions the guest characters too. It's always a good sign when you have characters that you can care about. In this respect, I think Chris Chibnall is an excellent writer for characters. With the first episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, it became apparent to me almost immediately just how tonally different this series would be compared to recent ones. It was a delight to see companions being given a proper backstory. Having two of them being somewhat related, with Graham being Ryan's step-grandfather, for me, it's something we haven't really seen since the RTD era, and it's refreshing after so many fan service-filled Moffat installments. It felt strange starting off the story with the companions, but in hindsight it made sense. Following an argument with his grandparents, Grace and Graham, Ryan goes into a forest. I wonder if that's the same one where they filmed Jodie Whittaker's announcement. But anyway, he goes into this forest. He finds this strange portal thing. He activates it and some sort of pod appears. He then does something which never gets done in Doctor Who. He rings the police! And that's when we're introduced to Yaz, who he used to go to school with. What a coincidence! It's a couple of minutes later on, and we're on a train and an alien threat appears, and then Jodie falls in to save the day. This was a really good way to introduce us to the 13th Doctor. Jodie immediately hooked me, not just as a viewer, but as an avid Whovian. Another thing which added to her grand entrance was the score by Sagan Akinola. Did I forget to mention that Chibnall hired a new composer for the series after Murray Gold decided to call it quits as well? Well, once again, everything was new, and I find his music rather refreshing. My one bugbearing with this episode, though, would have to be the lack of opening credits. I don't see the need for this. It's not like it would interrupt the flow of the story. Anyway, the Doctor makes friends with their new pals Ryan, Yaz, Graham and Grace, and they quickly want to learn where the alien thing came from. The Doctor is suffering from post-regeneration woes. Nothing we've not seen before, but it's executed better than what it was in Peter Capaldi's debut, Deep Breath. All of this allows for more character development. We soon learn that the villain of this piece is part of a warrior race known as Estenza. When the Doctor and her companions confront him, his name is christened by her as Tim Shaw. Brilliant. Throughout the ages, the Doctor has encountered various terrifying foes. The Cybermen, Davros, Sontarans, Weeping Angels, the Silence, and now Tim Shaw. Now, I've got to give credit to Chris Chibnall for wanting to create all new villains for this series, but seriously, this isn't the way to go. For me, he wasn't that much of a threat. Sure, it's only episode 1, and he's responsible for Grace's death, which we'll get onto in a sec. But the thing is, this guy gets brought up again through conversations in this series, and then when we get to the Battle of Ranskoor of Kolos, which is the series finale, he returns, and even by then, I just don't care. He is a poor man's version of Lynx and Styr, the two best Sontarans from the classic series. The teeth all over his face look ridiculous too. I mean, I know they're meant to be trophies taken from his victims and all. Predator vibe, anyone? But for me, it's a bit silly. At times, I think he had loads of chewing gum stuck to his face. Like, seriously, look at his face. Looks like he has chewing gum all over it. So yeah, Tim Shaw, not a great first villain for the 13th Doctor, but I'm sure that we're going to meet some more memorables in this series, right? Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But for now, let's talk about the conclusion of episode 1. The climax takes place at a construction site at night. The Doctor needs to stop Tim Shaw because he's had too much chewing gum, and here we get what is probably the best part when she gives her "I'm the Doctor" speech. She saves a guy called Carl and succeeds in stopping Tim Shaw, but he teleports away. Yay! I'm sure they're going to bring back... I'm so happy they're going to bring a villain back that I don't care about. The consequences of this, of course, is that yet another woman doesn't feel... The consequences of this is, of course, that another woman does indeed fall to earth. And it's Grace. She passes away, and what follows is a somber moment with her funeral. Graham gives her speech about her, and quite honestly, I liked Grace. I thought that she was a nice character, and it's great to see that there are consequences in Doctor Who again. After spending years and years thinking characters like Rory, Clara, Bill, and even the Doctor die, only to be brought back again in the next episode. Great job, Chibnall. We'll get the reveal of the 13th Doctor's costume. Some hate it. I quite like it. She goes off to find the TARDIS by building a teleportation device using Stenza technology. Earlier on, she also built her own sonic screwdriver. I don't even know if I like this design or not, but it does the job. She bids Graham, Ryan and Yaz farewell, only to teleport herself and those three into deep space. Cue a cliffhanger. This is a brilliant way to end the first episode because I actually wanted to see what happened next. So overall, The Woman Who Fell to Earth is a pretty solid beginning for me. It introduced us to great new characters, some not so great characters as well, and we got a taste of the 13th Doctor. Not the greatest debut of them all. I still say that title goes to either Spearhead from Space or The 11th Hour, but I can't complain too much. Visually it looked great, even though it was mainly set in Sheffield. Again, a taste of what is visually the best looking series of Doctor Who ever made. Now let's move on to episode 2, The Ghost Monument. Here we are greeted with a brand new version of the Doctor Who title sequence, along with the theme music. Overall, I love this sequence, and I think that this version of the theme is far superior to the Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi ones. I also like that there are no longer any teasers at the beginning of the episodes. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like those, but when you think back to classic Doctor Who, almost every story had you beginning with the title sequence straight away. Chibnall really wanted to take the show back to its roots. After all, we also had some of the best historical stories for years here, and they somewhat gave an education to younger audience about what was happening in that particular time period, much like the William Hartnell era. Anyways, the action of the second episode takes place almost immediately after the end of the last one. Our heroes end up on two different ships. The the pilots of these ships are actually having a race with each other. All of them end up reunited on the planet Desolation, one of the most deadliest planets of the universe. Here they go inside to meet with Art Malik's character, where he informs everyone of the Ghost Monument. Any prizes for guessing what that was when you watched this for the first time? Because I had a feeling. Very clever, Chibnall. Very clever. It's the TARDIS, of course. The rest of the course of this episode sees the Doctor and her companions and two new comrades, Angstorm and Espo, make their way towards the Ghost Monument, which is like the finishing line. Of course, they meet obstacles along the way, such as sniper bots, who are like this new stormtrooper race of Doctor Who. They can't even shoot the targets. Need I say more? They look kind of cool, though. We also learn that the Stenza were responsible for the destruction of residents that once resided on the planet. Oh great, we are only 2 episodes in and we're already harking back to Toothy McToothface. Of course, Ryan and Graham would be very pissed off about this, seeing as they lost Grace, so understandably they're both feeling emotional about the whole thing. Ryan and Graham's relationship is something which develops a lot through the series. By the time they get to the end of the series, their bond is much stronger, and how it was in the opening scene of The Woman Who Fell to Earth compared to how it was at the end, again, Chibnall shows how good he is at writing character arcs. It's a pity that the same could not be said about the villains that he's created. One of the other villains that our heroes encounter on Desolation are the Remnants, which are just pieces of cloth that fly around and threaten the Doctor, which is one of the most intriguing parts of the series. They speak to her, being unsure of herself, being in this new body. It is alluded to throughout that she's still working out just who she is. So far, Whittaker's Doctor has been very much alien, akin to Matt Smith's portrayal, but she's also kind-hearted, which for some reason reminds me quite a bit of Peter Davison's Doctor. There are elements of previous Doctors in there. Whether that was intentional of the writers or Jodie Whittaker herself, I don't know, but that's what I think anyway. The Remnants also talk about the Timeless Child. Who or what is the Timeless Child? This has led to a lot of fan speculation. Could it be Susan? It could be Jenny. It could be the Master. It could be Clara. It could even be the Doctor themselves. What do I think? Well, I am surprised that no one has suggested that it could be Khalid or the Candyman. What a twist that could be! What follows is the destruction of the Remnants after the Doctor lights Espo's self-lightened cigar, blowing them up because the area was filled with gas. Okay, kind of a cop-out, but we'll go with it. What follows is a bit of waffle with the Art Malik character in the holographic tent, and then we get the best scene of the episode when the Doctor finds the TARDIS, which is out of time. Good job, she had an ever so useful sonic screwdriver, otherwise all the main characters will be stranded there forever, left to die. That Sonic can really be a get out of jail card for the writers, regardless of era, can't it? The Doctor and her new fam inspect the new TARDIS. Both the exterior and interior have been redesigned too. The exterior I really love. It might actually be the best looking blue box prop from the Revive series, aside from the lamp. I'm not really a fan of the lamp. I think it's stupid. The interior, though, is hideous. I don't like it, and I actually think that this is a step down from the one that we had during the Peter Capaldi era. But at least it dispenses of custard creams now. Why is anyone's guess? Apparently Jodie Whittaker loves custard creams, so I'm guessing that is why the creative team decided to make this so strange decision. My thoughts on the Ghost Monument are that it's really good. It is visually stunning, and this is far more effects heavy than its predecessor. It also showed off what this new Doctor was like, and I felt more at home with this than I did with the first episode. You can never judge a Doctor properly by the first episode. Here I think this is just as good as episode 1, and as the viewing figures suggested, many enjoyed the first batch of episodes of this brand new era. The next episode, Rosa, is quite self-explanatory. It's about Rosa Parks, a woman who influenced the civil rights movement in America, but a time traveller known as Krasko is trying to prevent her from refusing her seat on the bus to James F. Blake, who was the driver of the bus. As someone who is into their history, I've got to say this: I love this episode. This is easily one of my favourite episodes of the modern era, and it is how an historical should be done, because in recent years we have had a few dud ones, like the Eaters of Light, and my criticisms for this would be having a lack of development for the villain, and being transported away at the end, which could again imply a return in the future. Other than that, the performance of all the cast is brilliant. The bus scene being a standout. Another shout out has to go to the scene where Yaz and Ryan are discussing the racial abuse that they've had in their own time. For once, the true villains here aren't an alien threat, but the human race themselves. This episode also highlights how far we have come since the 1950s as a society, but it's also an indicator that much more needs to be done, as segregation and racism is still an issue which is a common headline in the news stories of today, and that makes me quite sad. The next episode is back in the present day. It's entitled Arachnids in the UK. There's giant spiders, and they are in the UK, and there's a Donald Trump wannabe. Now, I'll be honest with you, I do like bits with the spiders. I think the special effects are quite decent. Certainly better than how they looked in Planet of the Spiders. What drives me insane, though, is this Trump wannabe. Why do we need references to Trump in Doctor Who? Just why? Also, the way it gets resolved in the end is pretty pants. I really wanted to see more character development for Yaz at this point. All we get is interaction with her family. Yeah, that's all nice and all, but that's pretty much it. And sadly, we don't get that much more with Yaz this series. She's just there, kind of like how Nyssa was there in the background and ended up being stuck inside the TARDIS one whole stories. The best parts of this episode were easily where Graham arrived back in his house. He saw visions of Grace. I thought it was really touching. Moreover, the final scene where he, Yaz and Ryan decide that they want to continue travelling with the Doctor. Apart from that, this one is rather forgettable, aside from the Stormzy joke, which is a little bit ludicrous, but at least it was explained why that was done, so I guess that was fair enough. Next up is the Tsuranga the Tsuranga Conundrum. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a really weird title. But this one had potential to be something special. It had a really promising beginning, but by the end, I just did not care. The Bating, while being as cute as an adipose, wasn't really all that threatening, mainly due to its appearance. On the flip side, I think that younger viewers might like this, so credit is where credit's due, I guess. The characters in this, though, they're just dull. And is it me? But that ending, with the ship being piloted at the end, does not make any sense. I actually had to re-watch it to understand a few aspects of this. And yeah, there's a few parts of this that just go over my head and it just really drags on me. Jodie's Doctor is talking a million miles per hour and I have no idea what she's going on about. This isn't Sherlock, you know. Also, I know I sound like a hypocrite, but there is a moment in this which annoys me a little. And it's another character moment between Ryan and Yaz. Like I said numerous times already, it's nice that we're getting this, but this sometimes happens at the most random moment. The ship is in peril. Where is the urgency? And this comes down to Chris Chibnall. So at this point, we're halfway through the series, bearing in mind that he wrote all episodes so far, apart from Rosa, but he received a co-writer's credit. So what do I think? Well, episodes 1 and 2 were great, Rosa was excellent, Arachnids was below average, and the Tsuranga Conundrum was meh. None of them I hate, which is good, but at this point, I've come to the conclusion, which may be alarming regarding the future of the show. Chris Chibnall is a great writer for characters, but when it comes down to science fiction, not so much. You've got to think, of these 5 episodes, none of these villains have been really stand out to me, and I don't think they'll come down as classics in years to come, and there's been nothing which I found all that compelling. At least with RTD and the Moffat eras, there were compelling storylines, whether it was the Daleks invading the Earth in the Stolen Earth, or all the Doctors assembling to save Gallifrey in the Day of the Doctor. Here, there's been nothing like that so far. Alas, that may be unfair to judge all eras with each other. After all, we've still only barely started being episodes in this era, so it may be fair to assess this at a later date. Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. The next episode is entitled Demons of the Punjab. It's another historical, and it carries a similar message to Rosa. Do I think that it's as good? Personally, I don't think so, but this story is decent. This is the most that we've got to see regarding Yaz's backstory for the series as a whole, and that's not saying too much. This is all about the partition of India back in the 1940s. I won't go too much about this regarding the historical events. Besides, it does get explained in the episode anyway, for what it's worth, and it is handled quite well. So, full marks to the writing there. But for me, the one thing that lets this episode down again is the aliens. One can be forgiven for thinking that the said demons in the title of this story are the Sajarians. But actually, I'd say it's Manish and the Hindu nationalists who are the real demons, as they kill Prem, a man who married Yaz's grandmother, who can be seen as a young woman here and an old woman back in the present. My gripe with all of this is that the Sajarians are only there to commemorate those who have died. Alright, fair enough. Well, in that case, why haven't we seen these aliens before? In almost 850 episodes of Doctor Who and hundreds and thousands of other mediums to be explored for the programme, how have these guys never turned up before? Furthermore, this means that once again, there is actually no real alien threats. As I said earlier, the real villains for this one are the nationalists, so really, if there were aliens in this or not, at the end of the day, nothing really would have changed, would it? This story could have worked as a pure historical just as well. And another point, this plot device with the Sajarians being mistaken for being the big bad and then turning out to be there without having a grand plan for world domination seems very familiar. Almost too familiar, in fact. We got the same plot device in Twice Upon a Time, and I did not like that twist in that story, and I certainly didn't like it here. The only hope I have for the Sajarians is that the 13th Doctor knows of them as assassins, which could suggest that they changed their ways at some point. So maybe, in a future episode, I will be all for seeing this species again. But this time, as the baddies rather than the goodies. Kind of like what was done in the Ice Warriors in the 2 Peladon stories from the John Pertwee era. I'm saying this now, but I highly doubt this will ever happen. It would be a nice thing to be proven wrong, though. Taking the Sajarians away, this story is a good Doctor Who writing debut for Vinay Patel. And once again, like Rosa, really hits home with the whole socio-political issues of that said time, as well as issues which are still prevalent today. The ending with Yaz and her grandma is a bittersweet moment too, along with the special arrangement of the Doctor Who theme being made with Punjabi instruments, which is beautiful to listen to. Episode 7, entitled Kerblam, is another series highlight for me. It is easily the best story out of this bunch, which is set in the future. After the Doctor received a visit from the Kerblam man with a package containing a fez, 2 regenerations late, but never mind, there's a call for help. The Doctor and the companions travel to Kerblam, a galaxy-wide shopping service, which is Doctor Who's answer to Amazon. I like this episode so much because of the familiar traits in the writing. Usually I complain about it, but seeing as up to this point we've had 6 episodes which have all been different in tone, this is acceptable. I don't know if this makes sense, but this feels like true Doctor Who. You have robots going out of control, in a similar fashion to the Vox from the Robots of Death, an all-time favourite of mine from the Tom Baker era. There's also a twist which I genuinely did not see coming. Keeping with the theme of antagonists so far, there really isn't anything to say, but at least here there are consequences. Kerblam left me with a smile on my face by the end, and I couldn't help but want more. The world of characters which are created by Pete McTighe here are very fascinating, and I will be down to see a sequel for this story in the future. Also, I love the title of this story. It sounds like a comic book. In addition, Kerblam is the very first televised Doctor Who episode to have an exclamation mark at the end of it. The Witchfinders seem to have got a mixed reception from Doctor Who fans. Besides the Morax with the hairdo, which looked ridiculous, I just love this episode. This episode could not have worked with any other Doctor, so it's a testament to Joy Wilkinson and Jodie Whittaker that this was done. The story features witch trials, a practice which was a common occurrence in the 17th century. Here our heroes arrive at Pendle Hill in the year 1612, and they end up finding themselves in the middle of a witch hunt. It is quite predictable how it all plays out, who the villain is and what happens to the Doctor. She gets accused of being a witch, but I just can't help liking this story. It's not perfect by any means, but it is a fun romp. We have a really good supporting cast. We have Siobhan Filliman, who's a really good villain, and we have Alan Cummings' take on King James I, and quite honestly, it's quite camp, but it's all for the right reasons. He is one of the best historical figures to ever appear in the show, up there with the likes of Charles Dickens, William Shakespeare, Vincent van Gogh, and Rosa Parks. If I must be critical of this episode, then I'd say that the last few minutes slow down a little bit. The reveal of the Morax is a bit anticlimactic, and I can't help but feel that we needed more. But hey, at least they paid the price for this one. Like Kerblam, the villain is undoubtedly defeated here, and I'd be surprised if we ever saw anything of this race again. Also, gotta love Bradley Walsh wearing that hat here. He really looks like he had a lot of fun in making this story. From what I've seen, he's really popular on set as well. By this point in the series, Graham is clearly my favourite companion of the 3, followed by Ryan. Yaz is my least favourite, but that has nothing to do with Mandip Gill. After all, I have huge admiration for her, as she went to the same university as me. The problem is that Yaz constantly has been underutilised all the way through the series. She is a copper, so why didn't she have more of authority? It's a constant banana skin which the writers slip on, and it's a real shame because I think, if given better writing, it would be a huge credit to Mandip as an actor and Yaz as a character. Like I said earlier, I just feel like she's just there for the sake of being there, and that really frustrates me because her character has potential. Graham and Ryan have been handled much better, given that their characters have both lost grace. Yaz has always been the odd one out. Besides being friends with Ryan at school, she's been a tag-along of the TARDIS team, and it was really exposed here. I hate to admit it, but I actually forgot that she was there through the majority of the Witchfinders, and it only gets weirder in the next episode. So let's talk about that now. Episode 9, It Takes You Away, is probably the biggest WTF of the series. It deals with a parallel universe and a weird place in between known as the Anti-Zone. There, they encountered Ribbons, and I forgot about this guy. It was only through a repeat viewing I was like, oh yeah, this existed, great! I don't think this is a terrible episode. In my opinion, only a certain type of viewer will like this one. Once everyone gets to the other side, the Doctor realises that she has encountered the Solitract. In this place, Graham is reunited with Grace, but luckily this isn't one of those cop-outs where dead characters aren't dead forever, like we endured during the Moffat era. This version of Grace is like a vision, and naturally, as Graham has mourned the death of his wife throughout the series, it makes sense that this happens. Sharon D. Clarke gives her best performance as Grace here. The chemistry between her and Walsh is good, and once again, I feel so sorry for Graham as a character, especially since at this point, he believed that this was the real Grace. It is the conflict which is easily the highlight of this episode, and to top it off further, when Ryan finally calls him Grandad at the end, the growth of the relationship between these two companions is complete. Character development. Still, it's a shame that the same can't be said for Yaz. Still there in the background while the Doctor is trying to reason with the Solitract, and what does she suggest to help matters? Reverse the polarity. Oh great, a reference to the Third Doctor. This is indeed helpful, but why is it Yaz who says this? To me, it just doesn't make any sense. Surely with thousands of years, or billions, but depending on what way you look at it, of time travel, solving problems which require science, did the Doctor not think this before Yaz made a suggestion? Which does not make sense coming from her character. If Yaz was qualified as something which related to a field of science, then I would see this as being more plausible, but I have already made the point that she is a police officer. She's not Albert Einstein. Here, I think there could be a number of reasons why Yaz said this line. All of them which I think would make sense. Number 1. The writer of this episode, Ed Heim, realised that Yaz was underutilised in this story, just for a change, so he needed to put in a line in somewhere, just to remind the audience that she's still there. Number 2. The writer wrote it anyway, ignoring the fact that Yaz is a 19-year-old probationary police officer and is unlikely to know about reversing the polarity of stuff. I mean, I never heard of the term until I heard it in Doctor Who, so if Yaz existed in the real world, then I'm guessing that neither of us would know any better. Number 3. It could be that Yaz is still trying to prove herself. It says this in a character bio on Wikipedia after all, so maybe she winged it by suggesting that to the Doctor, that she should reverse the polarity, not having a single idea about what any of it means. I'm clutching at straws here. Can someone please explain to me why she says this line? Anyone. Some of the writing for this episode just doesn't make any sense. And you thought that little tiny detail was a talking point of this episode? Then think again. After everyone is ejected to the Anti-Zone and then escapes back into our universe, the Doctor ends up in a white room with the Solitract. Ladies and gentlemen, it has taken the form of a frog. This was one of the moments where people just lost it online. People loved it, people questioned it. Why would you do this? This doesn't make any sense. Well, according to the writer, it does make sense. There is a throwaway line about a frog earlier on in the episode, but this is just so random. That's how I feel about it. It's random. I don't hate it, but I certainly don't love it. But it's random as hell. I certainly did not know what to feel when I first watched It Takes You Away. It is certainly different. For me, though, it failed to hit the mark. There are just so many abstract ideas in this episode, whether it was dead people showing up only to be imposters or that damn frog. Ed Heim is certainly ambitious with the script, and I'm sure that some fans will have given this some love. But some hate it, probably due to the complex themes which the story presents. There are some really good ideas that have been brought to the screen here, but it wasn't my cup of tea. It's funny because if you put something familiar in that room with the Doctor, whether it be a returning character or one of the Doctor's old personal possessions, even of one of the 7 grandmothers which she mentioned that she had earlier on in the episode, maybe I might look at it a bit differently. But we have got a frog, and for that, it takes you away. While not terrible, garners the title as the biggest WTF of the series. And that brings us to the series finale. Now, my series finales in modern Doctor Who, I like to see as a special occasion. Some of the greatest episodes I've ever seen are series finales. So when I heard that the title for episode 10 was going to be the Battle of Ranskoor of Kolos, I was quite excited. Shame on me. I don't know why I was. I should have known that this would have been the letdown. With self-contained episodes throughout the series, it wasn't like we're going to get a payoff to a story arc. The only payoff I can see is the growth of the 13th Doctor, Graham and Ryan as characters. Chris Chibnall came back to write this episode, and if you can remember about what I said about him earlier, about him not being all that great at sci-fi, then guess what? We get the same here. Who could possibly be behind the plot to destroy some planets, including the Earth? Well, again, I briefly touched upon this earlier. It's only Toothy McTwoface himself, Mr. Tim Shaw. And what does he do in this episode apart from sounding inaudible? Absolutely nothing. He wasn't that great in episode 1, but I gave him a pass, as often in season premieres, threats aren't that big of a deal. We did have Walking Fat 1 year, don't forget. But now he's back, and I still don't care. The only thing worth talking about is Graham and Ryan's motivations in this episode. At one point, I thought that Graham was going to turn to the dark side as he considered killing Tim Shaw. But hang on a sec. Wasn't it only 1 episode ago we had what was arguably the greatest character growth in the whole series, when Graham was finally accepting Grace was no longer being there, and no longer seeing time travelling with the Doctor as a form of escapism? We've taken a step back here, folks. Now he is belittling himself by wanting to kill the one who killed his wife. 2 wrongs don't make a right. In the end, he doesn't, thankfully. If he did, his character would be irredeemable. Plus the Doctor would berate him for it, and that would be the end of his time on the TARDIS. But why did this happen? This was Chris Chibnall, a writer who I've said throughout this video is good at writing his characters. He completely missed the point of Graham here, and that angers me. Sometimes I wonder if this was once written as a story which could have been maybe in the middle of the series rather than being written as a series finale. If you want me to be honest with you, if that was the case, then I don't see it as making any difference whatsoever. And if it makes no difference, then that means that this story fails as a finale. The only giveaway that shows that this could have took place after it takes away is that Ryan calls Graham Grandad again. Their dialogue exchange is very samey though, which makes me think that there is a miscommunication somewhere in the writing department, because we had the exact same conversation in the episode before this at the very end. Someone wasn't doing their job. Either that or it's just lazy writing from Chibnall, which wouldn't really surprise me, to be honest with you. Lazy is the best way to describe this finale. We have 2 ancient aliens who are part of a race called the Ux. I could take or leave these 2, doesn't really matter. Yaz is just there in the background again. Graham and Ryan get to take on the sniper bots, who still can't shoot their targets. The Doctor is saying some scientific gibberish and connects the Ux to the TARDIS. Oh, and Toothy McTwoface is trying to be threatening. This is a finale which is quite possibly one of the worst finales that I've ever seen since the show came back in 2005. As much as I cry foul of It Takes You Away, that episode is more credible of being a finale than this one. At least in that, there was a sense of achievement in that Graham and Ryan and even the Doctor with their own experience with the frog. Here it's just a rematch with Tim Shaw, which ends with him getting shot in the leg by Graham, and only a few planets are under threat in the end. It's not like the whole universe is at stake here. By the time it's all done and dusted, the Doctor gives a speech to the Yuks and Pultraki, who in fairness is played well by Mark Addy, aka Robert Baratheon from Game of Thrones, but he's wasted in this episode, just like a lot of other things in Series 11. The only hope which the Battle of Ranskoor of Kolos gives me is that speech which Jodie Whittaker perfectly delivers at the end, and it may hint that the best is yet to come from this era. If we were to examine the first 10 episodes so far out of Whittaker's tenure, then overall I'd say it's pretty mixed. There is certainly a lot of room for improvement in later series. The series succeeded in reigniting the interests of the audience. Moving the time slot from a Saturday night to Sunday evening was certainly a bold move which was made by the BBC. The trailers were nothing special in my eyes, but the viewing figures don't lie. The Woman Who Fell to Earth is the most watched debut episode for any series of Doctor Who ever, surpassing even Destiny of the Daleks from 1979 and the very first episode of the revival, Rose, in 2005. And sure, I know there's going to be someone in the comments now who's going to say, well, yeah, but every week since episode 1 the viewing figures have just got worse. And yes, you would be quite right. But that is something which is common with a lot of TV shows. The average viewing figures for Jodie Whittaker's first series were certainly much higher than Peter Capaldi's average viewing figures for all 3 of the series that he was in. One of his episodes, The Leaders of Light, has now gained the unwanted reputation of being the least viewed Doctor Who episode of all time. Yes, even less than Battlefield. But that's okay because The Eaters of Light was terrible anyway. For me, Doctor Who Series 11 is far better than later seasons under Moffat. For me, there's only really one episode this series which I didn't like, and that was finale, the Battle of Ranskoor of Kolos. The rest of the episodes I thought were either just below par, alright, or good. But if there is one episode that I had to choose to be my personal favourite from Series 11, then it would have to be Rosa, and I'm sure that some fans will agree with me on this. Other honourable mentions would have to go to Kerblam and the Witchfinders. I love Kerblam due to it being a reminder of classic stories that have come before it and probably inspired it. The Witchfinders I just like. I'm aware of its flaws, but for me, it's just a bit of fun. Other shout-outs go to The Woman Who Fell to Earth, The Ghost Monuments, and Demons of the Punjab. All the others I could take or leave them, and in all honesty, as I just mentioned, the Battle of Ranskoor of Kolos earns the dishonourable title as my least favourite episode from the series, as well as the most misleading title too. What even was that battle anyway? My judgment that I can take from these 10 episodes is that the show can go in a good direction. I think that it's still in a state of flux. Jodie will find her feet once Series 12 goes around, and the Doctor hopefully will be more defined, but so far I like what I've seen from the 13th Doctor anyway. I love Graham as a character. Freddie Walsh's performance have been great, and he's easily one of the best things about this series. I also like Ryan, his growth in confidence given that his character has dyspraxia. Tosin owns this character. And while I've criticised Yaz, I do really like Mandip Gill, and I think given the right material, Yaz could excel as a character in the future. It's frustrating that she's always been the one who's been the most underdeveloped in every episode, even in episodes like Arachnids in the UK and Demons of the Punjab, which we get to meet members of her family. The downfall of Series 11, I think, have to be the villains. Let's be honest, they are nothing to write home about. I think you can gather that I'm not the biggest of fans of Tim Shaw, and I don't want to see him again. All the others are just meh. If you had to choose a favourite, then I'd probably say the Kerblam men are my favourite. I just like the design. They do act similarly to the Vox, and they look reminiscent of the ticket robot from The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Kudos to Chris Chibnall, though, for not wanting any returning villain from the past to torment the Doctor in this series, along with any returning characters like River Song, etc. I think that it's the right time to talk about one more elephant in the room. The only episode to come out in 2019, which is the New Year's Day special, appropriately titled Resolution. So before I start to talk about this, Doctor Who Christmas Day specials are no longer a thing. To be honest with you, I'm alright with this. It got to the point where it was obligatory that we had to have a Christmas special every year, and most of the time they were either subpar or just crap. Some of the worst episodes ever are Christmas specials. So here we have Resolution, and this saw the return of the Daleks. Well, one of them anyway. And I can't tell you how I'm actually relieved to have a Dalek story. Chris Chibnall did tell us the truth about there not being any returning villains in Series 11, because this is technically a special. So that was very smart of Chris Chibnall there. I can easily say that this is the best Dalek story which we've been treated to for a long time. The thing which really annoyed me was the inclusion of Ryan's dada. Yes. So here we have a Dalek mutant taking over a woman's body, and we have a sensitive talk between Ryan and his dad. The episode also begins with some pointless chit-chat with two archaeologists who fancy each other. I just don't care. I just want to see the Dalek destroy everything. And there's nothing better than seeing a Dalek exterminate an entire army. This is how the Daleks are meant to be. For his first Dalek story, Chris Chibnall did a decent job. It's certainly not in the same league as Genesis of the Daleks by any means, but this was exciting. Seeing just one Dalek in all of its glory, albeit in the form of scrap parts towards the end of the special, really made me excited. The design of it wasn't all that great, but it wasn't meant to be, because, as I said, it's made of junk. The creature itself is taking over the body of one of the archaeologists from earlier on, and I can't help but think that Chris Chibnall, or the editors of this episode, watched Venom before producing this. Nicholas Briggs, as always, gives a great voice performance as the Daleks, and even now still manages to bring something new to the table after voicing the foes for almost 20 years. What really puzzles me, though, is that we never really got that much of an animosity going on between the Doctor and the Dalek, bearing in mind this is the first time in which Jodie Whittaker has faced not only an old enemy, but a biggest enemy, the Daleks, on screen. The characters have a history, and she rightfully says it, but that's it. There's nothing really edgy about this character that I can find, and that lets down the reveal of the Daleks somewhat. With Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, he really felt that he was scared of them when he encountered the single one in the episode Dalek. I'm not going to judge the scene by Jodie Whittaker's performance, because I genuinely think if the scene was written in a better way, she could have provided the highlight of this era so far. And I think she was capable of doing that. What we get too much of instead is this conflict between Ryan and his dad. I've got to say, Tosin really nails it in this scene, but it just feels so out of place. It reminds me of a similar scene which randomly occurred in the Tsuranga Conundrum between Ryan and Yaz, where they're having a little heart-to-heart, all while the Pating is causing havoc aboard the spaceship. And surprise, surprise, if you have been keeping up with this video, then you will know that this story was written by the same writer. So yeah, Chris Chibnall, without a doubt, a character writer, but he really doesn't know how to transition from one tone to the next. Doctor Who is all about changing tones, after all. It is a show about time travel, which has been constantly evolving from the word go. What I love about it is the fact that every week can be different show to the last. One week the Doctor and their friends would meet the Highlanders. The next they would be fighting fish people, and so on. The constant unnecessary shift in tone between scenes in Resolution, though, was really off-putting, and for me it was the biggest drawback of this episode. As a character, I really wasn't fussed about Ryan's dad. Sure, he got mentioned a few times during the series, but now seeing him in grovel just made me think that I was watching an episode of EastEnders rather than Doctor Who. And may I remind you that while all of these domestics are going on, that the greatest threat that the Doctor has ever faced is making a return. But first, we need to give parenting advice to viewers. I'm sorry, but no. It's nice that they make up in the end. The scene when the Kala mutant is attached to Ryan's dad is very good. It would have made a statement if the Dalek had killed him, as it was about to be launched into space anyway. But Ryan's dad survived. He's saved by the most cliche way possible for Doctor Who. Love. Didn't we get enough of this crap back in the Matt Smith era in stories like Closing Time? Why do we need this? So yeah, my feelings on Resolution are that it could be so much more. Also, it would have been nice if the story was called Resolution of the Daleks. That way, casual viewers would have realised that the Daleks were in this, because in the end, not many did. But seeing as there was one Dalek in the story which didn't feature as much as I would have hoped, this is probably why we're always stuck with the story being simply called Resolution. All in all, it is much better than many Christmas specials, and it worked well as a special for New Year's Day. I'd say that Resolution is a pretty average story, but it's more noteworthy of being a series finale than what the Battle of Ranskoor after Kolos was. And let's face it, Resolution pretty much is the finale, seeing as we don't get any more Doctor Who now until 2020. Once again, the omission of the title sequence at the very beginning, though, it's just unnecessary. Don't know why they're doing that. It's just stupid. So that's it, my review of Doctor Who Series 11, along with the New Year's Day special, Resolution. To me, it's all a mixed bag. But as I said earlier, there's a few things which this series got right, namely the Doctor and her companions. There's still a lot to discover about Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, but so far, to me anyway, she's a great Doctor. I love Graham, especially the banter he has with the Doctor, along with the relationship with his step-grandson Ryan. I also really like Yaz, but as mentioned earlier, she is crying out for a better script. Please, Chris Chibnall, anyone, give Yaz some better writing in Series 12. Otherwise, what is the point in having her? Prove to me that 3 isn't a crowd. As for what the series got wrong, I thought that the writing was really sloppy in places. The series provided us with a lot of great guest stars as well, who were mostly wasted, namely Lee Mack and Mark Addy. One exception would be Alan Cumming as King James I. You already know what I think about the villains. As Chris Chibnall did not bring back any old villains, it's ironic that the best villain from this entire set of stories has to be the reconnaissance Dalek from Resolution. To conclude, I certainly would not class myself as a lover or hater of anything about Series 11. As a series, it's alright. There's only one episode which I really didn't like. Of every series which has come and gone since the revival of Doctor Who in 2005, I can safely say that Series 11 will go somewhere in the middle for me. Some moments are really refreshing to see. If done right, I like the relationships which have developed between the characters from story to story. The visual effects are out of this world and are hands down the best that Doctor Who has ever seen in its long history. It can finally compete with the shows that really moved forward in an age which television drama is becoming more and more popular again. Going forward, I think with a better handling of characters, including the 13th Doctor, Doctor Who will go even further forward and become more of a talking point for all the right reasons, rather than all of the wrong reasons. It would be great if Series 12 would be the beginning of this. But for now, we'll have to wait until 2020 when the Doctor, Graham, Ryan and Yaz return for more adventures. Before I give you my final scores for all the episodes which I've just talked about, I would like to thank you all for watching my review of Doctor Who Series 11 all the way through. I know this was a long one. For more Doctor Who content, subscribe right here, and until next time, cheerio.